to his old team. So speaking of those classic cases of everybody said syndrome, that's kind of what happened with the Saints. Yeah. Not to quite the same degree. The reeling Saints handed the undefeated Falcons their first loss of the season thanks to Drew Brees and Ben Watson showing up and showing out. Skip and Stephen A. picked the Falcons on yesterday's show. And the Saints took notice. Who Dat Nation a little fired up, tweeting at First Take, keep picking against us. New Orleans is now 2-4 and Atlanta is 5-1. Stephen A., are the Falcons fraudulent?
Well, they certainly appear that way at the moment, but I didn't know about that tweet from the Saints. Was that the Saints as an organization who sent that tweet, or were those fans? Who exactly sent that tweet?
The Saints organization.
The Saints sent that tweet?
Yes, yes.
You're 2-4, and you sent a tweet like that? Really? Really?
It could have been the kid who runs the website, right?
The social media person of the Saints, yes. First Take.
Well, first of all, let me be respectful to Sean Payton, who I believe is a great coach, okay? I do believe he's a great coach, and it's nice to hear that he's going to be interested in listening to what other people has to say, because I do believe that he should leave the Saints. And you know how much I love me some Drew Brees, okay? So I'm not directing these comments towards those two individuals. But the Saints as an organization, well, congratulations. You're not the Aints right now. Congratulations. I'm sure that makes you feel good, okay? Now back to business. The Atlanta Falcons, I think Dan Quinn is doing a really good job. I think they really get after it. But when you look at them, their 5-0 record coming into this game, perhaps it was a bit fraudulent, because once again last night they found themselves trailing and in a position to have to come back for the 4th time this season. They opened the season against the Eagles. The next week they had to come back in the 4th quarter against the Giants. We know they had to come back against the Washington Redskins. Now they find themselves getting beat down by the New Orleans Saints. Both of us made a mistake with this, Skip Bayless, simply because we underestimated the significance and the impact that playing the NFC South, going up against one another has on folks. The fact that Atlanta and New Orleans, that's a huge rivalry. And maybe you should never summarily dismiss that. We did, because we lost all faith in Rob Ryan's defense. The New Orleans Saints seem to be a shell of themselves. And as far as I'm concerned, getting back to the Saints for a second, it's embarrassing that you would send that tweet to us talking about keep picking against you, because I can assure you we've been more right than wrong, because your record proves it, because you're still 2 games under 500. So we got to point that out. And the fact that they have looked like a shell of themselves, they've looked inept, they've looked unimpressive, particularly against the Philadelphia Eagles where they got embarrassed. So it's nice that they could really have a moment to really express themselves in a very, very positive fashion. Again, congratulations that you're not the Aints right now. I'm so touched by that. Getting back to the Falcons again, let's be clear. They're very, very talented. But I look at Ben Watson looking like Jimmy Graham or Rob Gronkowski, for crying out loud, last year with 10 receptions for 127 yards. Drew Brees was Drew Brees. But the Atlanta Falcons has just showed to us and have proven to us they still have a ways to go. They've got a lot of talent. They can get after it. They can put some points on the board. But I think it's 2 things, Skip. They're inconsistent defensively, number 1. And number 2, Roddy White ain't Roddy White anymore. And I think because of that, you got Julio Jones as the only individual, along with Devontae Freeman, that instills some level of fear in the opposition. If you can find a way to neutralize him, you can find a way to neutralize Atlanta's offense. It used to be a dynamic duo with Julio Jones and Roddy White. That does not appear to be the case anymore. I know Hankerson is the guy that they're relying on more so these days than a Roddy White. But Atlanta still has a ways to go. They're a good team. They can beat a lot of people, but a lot of people can beat them too. So they're good, but they're not elite. And I guess that's the way you would describe Matt Ryan as well. Very good, but short of elite.
So fraudulent or not?
I think fraudulent from the perspective of being an undefeated team and being considered one of the elite teams. They're not fraudulent as a good team, but they are fraudulent if you want to attach the word elite to them, because they are not.
Okay, I'll buy that. My view of this question is, they were fraudulent before the year started. I mean, they are exactly who I thought they were and were not. They're a pretty good team with what I thought was turning out to be a cakewalk of a schedule until last night. Didn't see that coming, and we do appreciate to whoever tweeted that out, whoever runs their social media. I hope he still has a job, but no, he'll be fine with this. Yes. We're teasing, but we appreciate you.
No, they ain't doing anything wrong.
No,
they ain't doing anything wrong.
It's
not a fireable
I'm kidding.
No,
but everybody,
no.
everybody picked the Saints. Do you know anybody? I mean, picked the Falcons last night. Do you know anybody who picked the Saints? Because I don't. I could have missed it. I read a bunch of.
On the pregame show, there was like one, I think, when I was watching on CBS.
I didn't see the pregame.
Yep.
Okay, so maybe that's fine. But to me, I didn't see that coming from that team, and all of a sudden the Saints look like a pretty good team last night. They actually look like the better team on the field. I thought they just flat out played Atlanta from the start, and Atlanta, as I feared in previous games, could not protect Matt Ryan. They got after him. They sacked him 5 times. Obviously, there were the 3 fumbles that just killed Atlanta, and they were all at the wrong place at the wrong time. Atlanta got a punt block. It was one of those nights where you just get buzzsawed right in half by a home team with a loud home crowd that was just waiting to explode against a division rival. Drew Brees turned back into Drew Brees last night. His QBR was 92 on a scale of 100. That was big time by him, and he didn't look hurt at all. He looked 100% healthy to me. So, look, the Atlanta Falcons came into this year and played 4 of their first 5 games, could have and should have lost 4 of the first 5. I'm going to remind you, remember, Eagles at Atlanta? Eagles miss a late field goal that would have put the Eagles ahead. Then you remember at Giants? Giants up 10 early in the 4th quarter. Matty Ice pulls it out. Good for Matty Ice. Then, I hate to remember this one, Brandon Weeden, of all quarterbacks, is up on Atlanta 28-17 at halftime by completing 13 of 14 passes for 164 yards. I'm talking about Brandon Weeden here. And my Cowboys in that first half rushed for 131 yards. They look like them off. And it's still, listen, last night what hurt my heart watching the game is even Brandon Weeden should have beaten both those teams, the Falcons and the Saints, because he was in position to beat both of them and they couldn't close the deal. And then, obviously, you remember the Redskins took Atlanta into overtime in Atlanta, into overtime, and Kirk Cousins threw the one ball, the receiver slips. We know that. So there are 4 games could have, maybe should have lost. Well, that's the Falcons, but I kept looking down the schedule, and I gave him the one at New Orleans, and the only one I thought was going to be troublesome was at Carolina on December 13th, because that division looks so bad to me. And I'm thinking, Atlanta's going to go 15-1 and have the home field advantage throughout the playoffs. And they just blew it because New Orleans is better than they have much better than they have played. Now New Orleans is going to do some damage in that division. But I remind you, to whoever tweeted at us, you lost at home to Jameis Winston this year. You lost to Jameis Winston from here on, and maybe I'm looking at a schedule that'll start to look a lot harder for the Atlanta Falcons. I'm not saying they're frauds. They're just pretty good. I'll give them pretty good.
Yes, I agree with you there, Skip. I agree with you. I'm not sold on New Orleans. Obviously, they've got a lot, they've got a lot of dead money on their books, and, they're retooling, and we understand that. So they're just a shell of themselves. And getting back to New Orleans, I'm just of the mindset that when you have individuals who are elite like Drew Brees, who I still consider to be elite, by the way, and a great coach like Sean Payton, I just believe that when you're retooling and you're rebuilding, individuals like that don't need to be a part of that process. And so I just think that they should enjoy themselves while they have it, because I think the Saints will go down before they rise back up again.
Fair enough.
Drew Brees and the Saints certainly like the bright lights, though. They have now won 19 of 21 games in the Superdome in primetime. Mark Ingram, thanks for the fantasy points, buddy. Moving on, Sammy Watkins isn't happy with the Bills, and you don't want to miss what he had to say. Also, heading into another sports weekend, we are all over it. See everything we're hitting up by checking us out on Instagram for the complete rundown. Back in a minute.